Welcome to the Unconsumed podcast. I'm Lee Corning. I'm here with Adam Altman, founder of Rebilly.com. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hi, Lee. Thank you.
Hey, you're an Austin founder, and I understand you live on the other side of town, so we appreciate you making the trek out here. We often hear that we're too far north for the South Side crew.
Traffic can be a little bit hairy at this time, but
yeah, well, we do all these like right after work, so I guess we are kind of fitting in rush hour. Adam, do we have any plans to change that? No. Okay. So you are founder of Rebilly.com, and what I thought was really cool about your story and your company is that A, you're a serial entrepreneur, so you've been around the block in the startup space before, and then now you're addressing a very real problem that most subscription-based companies have, and that is continual invoicing. So can you tell us about Rebilly as it is today?
Yeah, sure. So Rebilly is really about doing a few things. One is automating that invoicing, and then automating the collection of the payment.
Right.
That's really been our focus and our specialty, and that's kind of where the problem that I was originally solving when I created the predecessor to Rebilly. Rebilly grew out of another business that I had.
Another pivot.
Yeah. So
what was the original company called?
The original company was Net Media, which was a company that was in movie streaming. It was kind of a competitor to Netflix. Okay. But before Netflix was doing the streaming only, Netflix was the DVD delivery at that time. Before you had Hulu and Prime and all these great offerings on the market. So what
year would that have been?
That would have been over a little over 10 years ago, I think.
Okay, wow. So that is early to the space. Mm-hmm. So I imagine some of the issues there were bandwidth.
Those were the real issues were with the content itself.
Really?
So the content provided. So content was really controlled by a handful of content distributors, and those distributors had seen what the internet had done to the music industry.
Right.
And they were very fearful. And they were very restrictive in their licenses. So we felt like very strongly that people wanted to consume entertainment on a subscription basis. They would pay some monthly fee and be able to watch as many movies as they wanted to, whether it was 1 or 10 or 100. They would get their entertainment fix for a set monthly price, instead of having to either rent, which is what the studios or distributors really wanted, was the rental model. You go and you rent a movie, and you have the right to view it for 48 hours. And when that 48 hours expires, you can't view it anymore, and you have to go and rent something else.
Right. You were absolutely right there, because that's exactly what's played out. And when I go and I go on Amazon and I say, I don't want to rent a movie on virtue of principle almost now, because I either want to have full-on access to it forever, or I want to buy it so that I can have it. Well, and that's the funny thing about Netflix is like the catalog continues to change. But yeah, if I see the opportunity to rent something, I'm like more reticent to do that than I am to just buy it now. And so yeah, it's an interesting play. So how did Rebilly spin out of this?
Yeah, so how Rebilly really spun out of it is this business was really successful. It was clear like there was a market there for this, but it just was really difficult on the content side, getting traction with the big players. And Netflix announced that they were going streaming only. So I knew that it was just a matter of time. Our days were numbered. We were in our sunset, or we would have to figure something dramatic out. Netflix had, I think in their announcement or a subsequent announced they were committing over $1 billion to content, and we were playing with our own pocketbook. Right. So it was either go out and raise.
Is there $1 billion in your pocketbook?
No. I can show you what I've got, but no.
Adam Altman is now a friend of the podcast.
So we end up going to. I end up thinking about what do I really want to do with my career, with my life, and I've been a lifetime entrepreneur, and I thought what I really want to do is build something that creates sustainable and lasting value for other entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the seed of Rebilly was born. It took me about a year of wrestling with myself because I had a business that was successful,
right,
to say, you know what, I've got to start another business, and I'm going to dedicate. Actually, it took me a little bit more time to convince myself that I'm going to dedicate my full-time effort on Rebilly.
Right.
So I'd say by 2013, I was dedicated to Rebilly.
Gotcha. So have you guys raised any money around Rebilly? Because like I was looking at, it's funny because when I do these podcasts and I say, like, it looks like online you have like so many employees, but it's really just the people that are like putting their name on there, and this doesn't count contractors or anything. Like how many employees is Rebilly at this point?
Yeah, so we're 33.
33?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just grown organically.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had to raise money. So just bootstrap.
Beautiful.
Or money coming, like it's just money from my prior ventures.
Yeah. So I noticed in your background that there's like some investing backgrounds there, and usually entrepreneurs are also in the angel investing space. Do you do any of that?
I do a limited amount of angel investing.
Right.
So I kind of got into it. Well, I guess I've always been into investing because
right.
I think, you earn capital and then you have to deploy it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know how to use it for yourself, like for example, part of the reason why I don't go out and raise money is I only know how to deploy a certain amount of capital effectively. And if I don't feel like I can get a good return for capital, I'm not going to go and waste that money. That's part of just my nature of who I am.
It hits the money for me because I always talk about how I was a bond trader before I got into any of this software stuff like I'm in now, and I was more effective trading a smaller, essentially capital roll. We call it bankroll. I'm trying to think of nicer words for it. I was much more effective trading a smaller bankroll because I always said it's the difference between driving a speedboat and a barge. It's like if you're in a topsy-turvy market making essentially quick moves, mm-hmm. It's harder to get out if you're driving a boat or a barge as it is a speedboat. So that makes plenty of sense to me. So I was looking, back at your experience, and you come from, like you said, a long list of different ventures you've done. You're a lifelong entrepreneur, which we love. We're a huge fan of you. If you were selling baseball hats, we'd be wearing them. But you come from, essentially, you went to Claremont McKenna College, and that is, where's that?
Yeah, so that's in Claremont, California. That's just outside of Los Angeles.
Okay.
A very small school, part of 5 college community. There's 5 colleges that are connected to each other.
Okay.
Claremont itself had a total enrollment of about 1,000 students when I was there. I think maybe it's up to 1,200 now.
Okay, massive growth.
Yeah, massive. Well, it is. It's 20. Yeah, they've had to build dorms, and they've had their raise funds and all that stuff.
I've heard of Claremont McKenna before, and I'm having difficulty placing it. But is that a school of packed with entrepreneurs, or is that a breeding ground for that, or no?
Well, it's a mix. So there's really there were kind of a few tracks. So Claremont was sort of renowned for their econ undergrad program.
Okay.
So I was an econ major. You were either like an econ major or a gov major. It was also renowned sort of in the gov,
gotcha.
poly sort of space.
Yeah.
Or you were maybe in like the sciences and going to go on to become like a doctor. So the track was kind of like you're either going to be an accountant, a investment banker, or business consultant, mm-hmm. or you're going to go on to law school to become a lawyer, or you're going to go be a doctor. Those were kind of the tracks when I graduated.
So not bad tracks.
Yeah, they're not bad. I did an internship in consulting, and then I decided to go into investment banking, but I really disliked it strongly. So.
Well, let's get to that in one second, because I am interested in hearing about that. So are you from California originally, or did you go out there for
yeah, so I grew up in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
went really far to Claremont.
Yeah. Okay. So Claremont is in LA.
It pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. It was about 50 miles from my home.
Okay. So you really had to, pack up and head out
Yeah.
west.
When I had to do the heavy loads of laundry.
I tell you what, there is massive benefit to that, because if you look in my college dorm room, there was plenty of laundry, and it's because I went to college 8 or 9 states away. So like growing up, did you know that you were going to be interested in the entrepreneur space, or is this something you developed later?
No, I knew it. Like when I was growing up, I was always trying to start a business, or I was interested in business. I didn't necessarily know for sure that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. At some point, I thought I wanted to be a professional tennis player.
Oh, yeah?
But, reality set in.
Well, yeah. So I've been seeing tennis has kind of, there's like 4 or 5 major stars in tennis. And then I listen to sports radio a lot because I'm on the road a lot. And like tennis hits its crescendo in the summer months. We've been talking about Federer and Nadal. You have a favorite?
I really don't. I do really like Nadal and
Adam
Federer.
Altman's your favorite.
They're both fantastic players, but I really don't have a favorite.
Okay, and that's fine. I don't have a favorite either. I'm still an Agassi guy. But so like you mentioned that you knew it early. So were there any identifying factors around why you knew that you would be interested in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think it's just like the something about it. So one is, I think my parents, my dad is an entrepreneur. He had his own business.
Okay.
And so I always felt like it was a really small business, just a one-person solopreneur. Right?
Okay.
He was a solopreneur, and my mom helped him out somewhat. But I knew I just had the feeling like I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. I wanted financial freedom, and I knew that there were a few ways that I was going to be able to accomplish that. There are some careers that are really lucrative, but entrepreneurship is one of those paths. It wasn't until later on, after I was already an entrepreneur, that I realized how much I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, because as I grew older, I felt like I really wanted to have an impact and make a difference. And I think a lot of people, they can do that from within organizations. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to do that.
Right.
You can be entrepreneurial even within a non-entrepreneurial organization.
Yeah. It sticks out so much more in those places, I think.
So, but for me, I felt like this was my path. This is my calling, and this is the way that I make a difference in the world.
So when you say make a difference in the world, are we talking about feeding the kids in China that we always used to hear about when we had to finish our dinners? Or are you talking about difference?
For me, it was Ethiopia, but
yeah. Okay. So did you have any special projects?
My dinners.
Were they starving kids in Ethiopia?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what did they say? Because I think like one generation before mine is when they were saying the starving kids in China.
Okay.
Because I can't remember what it was for us. Starving Africa was where it was for us. Not as specific as Ethiopia, but I guess that makes sense. So have you done any projects like that, where not-for-profit type work, or is your impact more local?
No, my impact is different, and I think it's very different. So I think that for-profit business has a big impact. Like, we employ people. Those people have families, so they're doing things. But those people also use their dollars to go, and those dollars go into the economy as well.
Right.
Not only do we employ people, but we also pay vendors, and those vendors employ people. And so there's a lot of money that gets circulated through the economy,
right?
In whether we're employing them or whether there are other vendors. I think that has an impact on on the world. And the way that I view it is how we shape the world is we're trying, like at Rebilly, we're trying to make the like give our clients peace of mind. And that's something that you can't necessarily put a price on. We do, because we have to sell it, and we have to,
because there's market forces at play here. Yeah,
we have to pay for our, pay our vendors and pay our employees, and
which is part of the mission
stuff.
anyways. Yeah.
So, but for us, it's proof that we are creating the value, because you can do that. You can go and you can sell it, and you can get the money coming in, but it won't keep coming in, and you will lose your customers if you don't deliver them value.
Right.
So over time. So
Absolutely.
if you can deliver them value, if you create value for your customers, you create value for your employees and your vendors, and if you had investors, for them, if you're creating value for everyone, then it becomes like a win-win, and you're creating more value in the world, because it's not a zero-sum game out there.
Completely agree. And one of the things that is going through my mind while you're saying this is that what you're describing is one of what I believe the most undervalued ways of exhibiting change or making a difference, making an impact. Because those three words are thrown around like so flippantly right now. But the way we've done that for a long time is by employing people, allowing economies to thrive, and then those people in turn can turn around and do whatever they want with their money. And it's not enabled in the first place without this kind of entrepreneurship that lives, I think, best in the West of anywhere in the world. But yeah, I think I'm glad to hear you kind of elaborate on that, because that's something that no one else is saying right now. Or not no one, but less. How about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, it's not that I'm anti-charity or I don't want to,
Right.
help the kids that are starving. Of course I do.
But you are.
I am in the way that I can, and the way that I'm best positioned to, and which is to contribute to the world in this way. So,
absolutely, yeah, I think that's awesome. And so, I apologize for going on a tangent there, because I was just about to ask you about your summer at Bain.
Yeah.
So you finished up at college. You kind of identified as an entrepreneur. You've observed this growing up. What business was your dad in, by the way?
He was in the gemstone and jewelry
very
business.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's always good to have a diamond guy, just for the record. Mr. Altman. Okay, so then you've identified this in yourself, and you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but Bain comes knocking, and you say, it's hard to turn down that logo, or what?
Well, no.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I thought that the path I had to take was that I had to go work for either in a big consulting firm or a big banking firm for a couple years, then go get my MBA, and then go work somewhere else and get more experience. And then maybe I could start my own business and become an entrepreneur. I really didn't know that I could do it when I was younger.
Yeah, interesting.
So, and I wanted to change that. So years later, say probably about 8 years ago, or so, a friend of mine from college who also ended up becoming an entrepreneur came to me and he said, "Hey, Adam, I've got this idea. I'd like to..."
I love that phone call, by the way.
Yeah. Especially when there's money involved. Yeah. At the end of it. "Hey, I've got this idea. Let me know if you're interested." So he's like, I felt like when I graduated from Claremont, I was pushed into, I don't know, I think he did some kind of consulting. And then he worked for a big aerospace company. And then eventually he was moonlighting on his entrepreneurial thing. He built it up enough that he could go off and become an entrepreneur. He's like, "I feel like the Career Services Center at our college is pushing people into these main paths. Now I think things have changed these years with tech growing.
Right.
But they're recruiting. It's the same kind of thing. You've got a path. And people don't know necessarily that there's another way." So we went, I guess, pitched the college on trying to put together something like a Shark Tank of sorts.
Okay.
To try to encourage entrepreneurship. We started this prize. It was a $25,000 a year prize for students.
Cash, not scholarship, right?
Right.
Okay.
To cash for their business.
Beauty.
Yeah. So but there were caveats on we wanted to do it where we and the college could take a percentage of the business, but because of, I don't know, college reasons, school reasons, it had to be a grant instead.
Well, have you ever heard the Snapchat story about how those guys got like a 10% stake? One of the schools. It was either a Catholic high school or a Catholic university got 10% of Snapchat, and they got a $20 million check on the IPO day.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild. So I guess they're hoping for the flyer, right?
Yeah, so that's what I thought. It would be a great opportunity for the school to be able to get more capital when some of these students are eventually successful, and I'm sure that they would be.
Right.
So kind of pitched that. That was kind of a no-go, but we could go on the grant route. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, one of the professors there pitched one of the older alum who is really successful. So I don't know if you've heard of KKR. It's a big private equity company. So one of the K's and an R went to Claremont, and they're very generous with the school. Mm-hmm. So they I think the first year our prize was maybe $15,000, and we boosted it up to $25,000, and eventually it had two tracks, one for social entrepreneurs and one for just straight business.
What's a social entrepreneur?
A social entrepreneur was an entrepreneur that's having some kind of social impact. So it would still be a business, have a positive business model, mm-hmm. not necessarily like a nonprofit, and not necessarily like fundraising based model. But it was solving specific social problem. Like it was employing a specific population that was underemployed, or targeting to creating a product that has benefits for a disadvantaged segment.
Right. Okay. Very cool. And so this is before or after Bain and the
this is way after. Okay,
mm-hmm. So this is 8 years ago. I'm sorry.
So Bain was an internship, summer internship, and then I went back to school. Decided I'd go try banking instead. I found a bank that said, "Hey, we're this is a great opportunity. We don't work you that many hours. It's a smaller firm, and it was in San Francisco, and it was during the .com boom. So things were really exciting."
Yeah.
I was sold, went there, and it was not like that at all. So I thought I was going to be, I didn't know I really didn't know what I was going to be doing. And, but I thought there would be some kind of financial modeling or some kind of analysis it wasn't like that at all.
What was it like?
It was kind of like, I felt like in a way it was just like grunt work.
Okay.
Like, here's a stack of newspapers. Go through them and find every company that's listed in there. Like, okay. And we want it done by Monday.
Oh, yikes.
Tea on Friday afternoon. Okay. That type of thing. And so I was working not the 60 to 80 hours they said I would work, but I was working 100 to 120 hours a week.
Yikes.
Really disliked it. And the people there that's the thing that had bothered me the most was the managing director.
Okay. And in banking, managing director is like head honcho.
Yeah, this is the head honcho. He's like the CEO of the office. There was a East Coast, the headquarters were on the East Coast. He wasn't in charge of the whole company, but he was in charge of the San Francisco office.
Okay. And
he had an anger problem, and he was in anger management therapy. And
it's not funny. I'm laughing because anger I think is funny sometimes. But anyway, sorry.
It is. Not always when it's directed at you, though.
No, it's also funnier in retrospect.
Yeah, it is. So this guy, I had been warned about him. And on my first real project, mm-hmm. I had to put together some comparison between basically like the companies trade at a PE ratio. So right. I was putting together a comparison of what this private company might sell for. He was trying to pitch this private company that we could help them sell their company to other public companies.
Right.
And I do the comparison. The older analysts had warned me, check your work, double check your work. I had double and triple checked it. And the way, like, as an analyst, you're at the bottom of the totem pole.
Right.
And so I go to this meeting, but before you go to this meeting, like I'm turning my work into the associate, who's just one rung really above me.
Right.
And then the associate's handing it off to a
vice president.
Yeah. Who's handing it off to the managing director. And so this one, maybe there was not that vice president layer. Okay. Maybe the associate gave it straight to the managing director. It was clear the managing director had not even looked at this thing before the phone call. So we're in this conference room. Uh-huh. We have this speakerphone in the middle, and the managing director's having this conversation with this guy. He was an important guy. He was the original founder of Compaq. And
okay, I've seen movies about him.
Rod Canyon. And there were a couple guys from his team. And I thought this was really cool. And then the managing director, while having this normal conversation, his face turns bright red. And he takes out this red pen and he's marking up this PowerPoint which we had FedExed to them. Okay. This is the way things were done kind of back then.
Yeah.
You'd make a pitch deck and you'd FedEx it to them, and then they'd open it and you'd go over it with them on the conference if you weren't going out in person. We went out in person for the next meeting. But so after that meeting, I'm wondering what was all that about. The managing director comes up to me and he said, "Adam." "Yes." "Did you check these numbers over?" I'm like, "Yeah, I actually triple checked them." He's like, "Well, there's no way this is right. Let's go to your computer right now." Right? Yeah. So we go to my computer. He's like, "Pull this. There's no way that this company is worth more than that company. And, you make me look like a fool in front of these guys," and just going on and on.
Right.
So we pull it up, and it turned out I was right.
Mm.
And before he could say anything, he had just disappeared. He had vanished.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so that was the managing director. He within a span of the short window I was there, he was throwing books at other analysts. he was just going crazy. And he wasn't the only one. The thing is, he was having an impact on those around him. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just him that was a real jerk.
You're very careful with your words, which I appreciate on a family-friendly podcast.
Yes, it was spreading to those around them because that type of behavior is contagious. Our attitudes are contagious, and I snuck out one night at 10 p.m. Yeah, at 10 p.m. sneaking out. And I remember I went to go use a payphone. I don't remember if I had a cell phone or what the situation. I didn't have a cell phone back then.
Boom.
Yeah. Call my parents, and I'm upset.
Yeah.
And I feel like such a failure. I remember calling them and saying, "Guys, I have to quit. I don't want you to think I'm a failure or a quitter, because I had never quit at anything in life. But I said, this job will change me, and not for the better."
Right.
And I can see it starting to happen, and I can only imagine what I'll be like 2 years from now. So I told them that.
Right.
And I had this burden. They said, well, that I was surprised. They were very supportive.
What do you think was going to happen?
Well, I thought, I had never quit anything. I thought they would be upset with me.
Yeah, you didn't know what was on the other end.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Didn't know that I would have that support, but I told them I wanted to try to figure out a job before what I would do before I quit, because I didn't want to quit and have nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then I couldn't afford my rent. Couldn't afford anything.
Was it crazy expensive out there back then?
It was insane. I was in a 399 square foot apartment, and it was, I don't know, it was over $1,000 a month back then. That was 99.
I don't even know how big this room is. More than 399, right?
Yeah, it was similar-ish.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that wouldn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in this. A couple of things I want to point out is I'm thrilled that you were able to find that and identify that in yourself before it took over, because a lot of people in that situation are like, this is what I'm doing. I don't care what it makes me. I'm just going to be that. And so is that the point where you were like, I'm not going to be changed by other people's cultures. I'm going to create my own?
It was the start.
Okay.
I'd say it's evolved over time. So I ended up talking to another investment bank.
Well, I got to hear the quitting story first, because I love a good quitting story.
This is an interesting one.
After the sneak out, do
Yeah.
you go back in, or do you go home, or what?
I know I go back in, go to work, finish my work.
What time did they let you out of there?
You finish it like around midnight.
And what time were you coming in?
8.
Okay.
Typically, but sometimes you finish at 2, 3.
Oh, geez. And that's how you tally up 110 hours.
Yeah, 120 in a really bad week.
So I used to go 90 hours a week in trading pits, and to me that was undoable.
Mm-hmm.
And so how long were you doing this? 2 years?
No, I did it for 3 months.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I quit early.
Good for you.
Yeah, I don't know that it would have sustained, or anybody could have sustained that kind of pace, but it was a bad several weeks leading up to that decision to quit, and another I think it took me about 2 weeks to figure out what I was going to do, and then I was going to quit. It was I think it was a Thursday.
Oh,
and
Thursday's a great day.
The director, he's traveling. I'm like, I can't quit today.
Okay.
Can't quit today. And it's Friday. He's still traveling. He'll be back on Monday. Okay. Well, can't quit today. Now, this wasn't a Monday through Friday type of job. It was also a Saturday, Sunday. Now, it was only the analysts that were in on the weekends for the most part. The associates came in sometimes just to make sure the analysts were there.
Right. Check up on things.
Yeah. But I worked through the weekend hard, because I knew I was going to leave my other analysts
to pick up
with a bag of stuff to do if I didn't, do it. So I did it, and they've respected me for that. They bring up that. So Monday comes along. Mm-hmm. He's out traveling again. Oh. And I'm like, this is it. I'm doing it anyway.
Okay.
So I go to the bathroom, right? And I bring the stuff with me, and I get a Ziploc bag from the office, because I know once you quit, you're kicked out.
You're getting walked out.
Yeah, you're getting walked out. So I put everything. I put my pager in the Ziploc bag. I put everything in there. I zip it up, and I go in to the office manager, because the managing director wasn't there. And I told him, hey, I'm resigning effective immediately.
Here's your stuff.
And he was just shocked. He was like, he didn't have any words.
Right.
And so I started to leave the office. I said goodbye to the analysts. I said they knew I was doing it, but the older analysts, the first year analyst knew I was doing it. The older analyst didn't. I told them goodbye. Then the associates and the older analyst chased me out to the elevator. I was already at the elevator bank. I was ready to go. I was gone. And they chased me out. They're like, oh, don't go yet. Like, why are you going? What do you do? Like,
bring us with
I'm
you.
Like, yeah, I'm like, no. Then I get a phone call. Comes from the CEO of the company who I had only met once. He was in the East Coast office. And he was also not a nice guy.
Okay.
We had about an hour-long conversation.
Okay.
And I shared some feedback about what I thought was wrong with the office and the culture. he didn't seem to care to hear.
He was like, I made that. That's exactly how I wanted it.
And he threatened me. And
he threatened?
Yeah, he threatened me with I think you take a small signing bonus to go there. And he wanted that back.
Oh yeah, a little clawback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I thought you meant like he wanted to.
No, he didn't want
a fist fight.
He was across the country.
I
mean, we could schedule it.
I'll meet you in Omaha.
But yeah, that was it was an interesting.
And this is 8 years ago.
No, that was in '99.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The prize, the student prize, was 8 years ago.
Gotcha.
So that was back in '99. Then I ended up going to an internet startup, which really helped shape my.
How quick was that?
Straight away.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had found it while I was. So what I was doing.
Make a note, kids. Always have your backup if you're going to walk away.
Yeah, always have it. So what I was doing is, because the way, you have these limited lunch hours, it was really working lunches in banking. I was going to walk to pick up fast food, and I'd run over to a hotel that was across the street from the office and use the phone banks there to make job calls. And I found an opportunity. A former college roommate of mine had went to work for an internet startup, and he had just hired another friend of mine away from banking. So I was like, hey,
I'm available.
Do you have anything else? So I'm looking for a change.
Yeah.
So he did. He made me, an offer. Well, it didn't matter what the offer was. I was going down and I was going to do it. So that was, I actually ended up moving back to Los Angeles to go work for the startup iWin.com.
iWin?
iWin.com. It was a free games for prizes website.
Which has also taken off quite a bit recently.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny, because in my senior year of college, I tried to start a business with 3 other classmates, and we called it Money Monkey. And it was the same exact idea. We just couldn't execute. So we got as far as buying the domain name, which was a big thing back then. We had to borrow money.
Yeah. Well, what did it cost you for the domain?
It was like $100 for the domain name or something back then.
Yeah, back then you had to have buy your own hardware and everything.
Yeah, hosting was not easy, and nobody knew how to program for the web. It was very hard to find.
Brand spanking new.
And Claremont is interesting. There's 5 colleges there. One of them is Harvey Mudd, which is an excellent engineering school. Okay. I think it's the #1 undergraduate engineering school in the country. And so we ended up kind of hiring 2 people from there to help us start to build our product out, but we couldn't get far enough with the time that we had.
Right.
So
yeah, this reminds me of some of my failed ideas. And so one of the things I think is so important for people to know about their ideas is ideas are simply that until someone can actually do this. And actually doing the idea, it can cost money, it can cost an extraordinary amount of time, and largely what I'm finding out maybe more recently is that for you to execute on an idea, it requires that you don't get to execute on a lot of your other ideas. So there's the opportunity cost associated with that. So as an entrepreneur that has a killer resume of doing this in a serial fashion, do you have any comment on that for the layman kind of figuring this out on their own?
Yeah, what you just said, I read a line really similar in a book.
I probably wrote it, just for the record.
Yeah,
I wrote that.
Pretty sure it was you. Which was, by saying yes to this, what are you saying no to?
Right.
And it was a book about coaching, and I used some of the questions from that with my people who we have one-on-one meetings with, but I also use the questions on myself,
right?
Because as an entrepreneur, I've got a flaw, which is that I don't see how hard it is to do some things, right? I don't have that perception. So, because if I did, I probably would never have done some of the things that I've set out to do.
That's the double edge of being an optimist,
mm-hmm.
right? It's like, oh, now we have to do it? All right.
Or you think you're going to do it, but you think it's going to be much easier and faster.
Yes.
And the path is much longer and more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So it's constantly that. It's constantly a struggle to prioritize. You have to say no to things to be able to say yes to something, to be able to get something done.
And one thing I'd add to that is there's a lot of people that say yes to too many things, and it what's the term? It inflates the price of yes, which means that your yeses are worth almost nothing because there's no weight behind it. Because if I say yes 100 times, that yes is worth a fraction of 100 of what one yes is in a full dedication. Or even people say yes to 2 or 3 things. I think that's stretching it, but it can be done. But too many yeses is a loser's game, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. So, tell me about the few startups you had before Rebilly that weren't the media company, and then I'd love to do a brass tacks look at Rebilly Online.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I guess my real start in the internet was at this iwin.com.
Mm-hmm.
I was employee number 7, and within 2 months, because this was .com boom time,
right,
we were over 150 people, and we had already moved 3 offices. 2 months from there.
Okay.
The CEO, you mentioned you were a bond trader. The CEO was a former Solomon Brothers Liar's Poker guy.
Does he have a name I might recognize or no?
I don't know. Fred Krueger?
No. If it's not in Michael Lewis's book, I probably don't know it.
So he had hired professional management, not us, obviously, but they were legit professional management, and they had to extensive, termination clauses with their existing employment. So they weren't going to be on board for 6 months, which was an eternity in internet years.
Right.
So, so it was a free for all, and our little biz dev team, as we called our team, kind of did everything. I started our affiliate program. I did our media buying, and we had millions of dollars. So I got to spend millions of dollars. I got a real education in advertisement. Got to design creatives. It was a lot of things that I had read about because I had always had an interest in business and marketing.
Right.
But I had never got to put into practice because in school, it was a liberal arts school. There were no real business classes. It was kind of like learning how to think.
Yeah.
And in my experience, in consulting, it was more of that, thinking smart and solving interesting business problems, but not the real sort of practical stuff that you would use day to day. You might change your strategy once every few years. You might need to advertise every day. So doing something like that, how do you actually execute an advertising campaign? How do you build traffic? How do you, how do you monetize it? How do we build a product? All of these things were fascinating, and our team figured that out.
Right.
So we got to do that. I think it was mostly luck, the luck of the timing. My college friend, my former college roommate was, got this opportunity and fortunate enough to share this opportunity with me and a couple of my other classmates, and we benefited from it dramatically. So got a second education there.
It's funny you say that because I hear a lot of management consulting people or business consulting people or MBA folks. I don't have an MBA, and maybe it's me flexing my I don't have an MBA muscle. I can do it anyways. Is that I think a lot of times, and I'll tell you this, I probably would like to get an MBA because I like to learn things, but I haven't gone through the formality of it, is that there seems to be a practicality to being a practitioner as opposed to the theoretical view of how to run business. So it sounds like I'm unpacking this obviously from a distance here to say, like, you're saying that the value that you found in iWin was from being the practitioner as opposed to talking about it in a class and running hypothetical spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So you can only read about things so much, and reading is an awesome way to learn about things. Mm-hmm. And I read a lot. Still,
I just got a coupon essentially for $1,000 of books on Amazon, so I'm going to need to get a couple book recommendations from you because I ran out around 20 books.
Okay, I definitely have some.
Perfect.
So I but yeah, you learn by doing, and think about it from I think about it from my sports perspective. Okay, I play tennis. Imagine how good. Now I was a decent player. I played in college. Imagine how good I would have been if I had only read about tennis. I would have never made the team. Any team.
Yeah. I read about boxing a lot because I think boxing is beautiful, but man, would I get beat up.
Yeah. Until you go out and practice and train it. Yes. So if you think about it, there's a saying that we use sometimes: practice makes permanent, right? If you practice the wrong thing, you're forming bad habits. Okay. You practice the right thing, you're forming good habits, you're making it more permanent. But
that's better than what I usually hear was practice makes perfect. Right?
Yeah. Well, there's no such thing as perfect.
Yeah, I'm also aware of that, unfortunately.
So we, I just looked at that time as this is excellent practice. Yeah. There was a lot of practice, and it was fun, and I had responsibility, and maybe I some weeks I don't think I ever worked 120 hours a week when I was there, but some weeks I was working 90 hours because I loved it so much. Mm-hmm. I had so much responsibility. I was learning so much, and I was surrounded with my friends. So
great environment.
Yeah, it was a great environment.
It's a cultural 180 essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So like one thing I'd draw on that is like the starkest contrast in the stories you're describing here are toxic culture, force-fed management, and a great culture where you will work 90 hours a week on your own volition because you want to. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of a holy grail that and millennials take all kinds of grief for this, and I don't think it's necessarily on millennials, is to say like people are searching for that, like I want a job where I really want to be there and be involved in this culture that it just like is magnetic. So like I remember this one time, it was I was trading, and I was on the back end of a couple great months, and when that's going well, there's nothing more fun. And it was President's Day, and I go into the office and I saw that it's President's Day, and I didn't know that the markets were closed on President's Day, but they're closed. And they say, you got to go home. There's nothing going on today. And I was like, I was really upset about that. And I was like, well, this isn't, they're dead. Why are we closing the markets for them? Or like, does anyone else want to play ball today? How about Japan? Are they ready? But yeah, I think I'm like constantly trying to rediscover that. And so, and I guess this plays right into the story at Rebilly, because that's essentially in your hands. And do you feel like you're creating that culture at Rebilly that is that magnetic?
No, I've struggled with that.
Okay,
it's been difficult, but it's been something that it's taken me a lot longer than it should have, mm-hmm. to realize how intentional you have to be, mm-hmm. about building your culture, and how it just is not as organic as I thought it was or should be.
Okay.
And I thought culture is something that should happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be brutal at times.
I can tell you, a lot of folks would come on here and just say, "Yep, we're doing it perfect." So I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, we're not perfect. If we were perfect, wow, the sky's the limit
It would be a lot of fun.
there's so much. There's a huge market opportunity,
Yeah.
that we're not seizing because we're not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have to be perfect to seize it. We just have to be better.
Yeah. Well, there's no more higher truth than that. As an observer of markets, I can tell you that is factual. Can you pull up the Rebilly site here for us? So to fill brass tacks on Rebilly, and I thought this was really cool, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation today is because you've created essentially a backbone type of mission critical application that the small business, I think, it's a no-brainer. Because first off, there's a Gartner report floating around that I think it's something to the tune of about 80% of software will be subscription-based, or SaaS is the term the market uses. And if you're a small business and you want to be in the SaaS playground, you can go up to pricing. You want to click that, Adam, real quick? And take yourself to $120,000 or a $12,000 company, which is essentially, that's a very tough road to hoe. And Rebilly is essentially willing to hop on with you for free and give you this pioneer package until you kind of grow up with Rebilly. So I saw this and was like, this is perfect. And even for something as small as like this podcast, right? So like we fluctuate between 4 and 6 sponsors at a time. And we've had issues remembering to send out invoices, and it's something so basic, but Rebilly will handle that all for you. And oh, by the way, Adam, if you go up to the back to the homepage, and any entrepreneur watching this will love to see this, can you go down to that partners page again, see all integrated payments? If you're running a website and you don't see your payment gateway on here, send these guys a note, because they do a great job of bringing in new partners. And so, for instance, there's a business I have an affiliation with called Contract Spot, and it is all about getting payments out on time. And so this closes the loop. And so that's like the 10-second view of when I look at the website. This is what I think. This is what I think about what Adam's done with this organization. Now, can you take us a level deeper on what Rebilly does and what this means for the entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So like part of that is being quick with our gateway integrations. So if we don't have it, we're willing to do it. And it doesn't matter if you're a pioneer it doesn't matter if you're paying us.
Right.
We'll do it because we figure it's something that is going to be reused by other people. So that's when it comes to gateway integrations. Now, when it comes to, if you look at sort of from a higher level, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people get more people from the pricing page to the thank you page. And so this is how I have, they just turned 9. But I have 2 9-year-old daughters and a 3-year-old. Yeah. Okay.
So I have twin daughters too.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk about this later.
So this is how I explain it to them and I will say that by having them in this specific age that they're at has been very beneficial for me with my team, because a lot of times I'll say things and I get the bobblehead. I don't know if you know that bobblehead.
I have my own bobblehead.
Yeah, I get it. But they don't always understand it. And sometimes they're afraid to stand out, to admit that they don't know what I was talking about.
Right.
But my daughters, they don't care to tell me that. They don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I'm not frustrated when they say that either.
Because they're not.
Like, yeah. So from the pricing page to the thank you page, and then to get more renewals paid. So that's kind of what we do. And how do we do that? Well, we have a certain philosophy. One is that the business should be agnostic from your processor or payment gateway, payment institution.
Right.
So the way we do that is we vault the payment card data securely.
What does that mean, vault?
So we store it.
Vault. Like I thought you meant like
encrypted.
vault, like when a gymnast is running down.
Oh, yeah.
The vault.
Yeah, just
we're talking Seinfeld vault here. Okay, gotcha.
So we store it securely, and we so that gives you the portability, which is something that's important as a merchant, because when you're starting a business as an entrepreneur, you're thinking, oh, you're not putting a lot of effort into who you choose as your initial bank.
Right.
And then down the road, you may have reasons that you want to change your bank. You may need to change it. But you may be handcuffed to them if you're relying on them for that storage, because you can't as a business, you don't want to handle that data yourselves. So you outsource that to.
And this brings in the concept that you guys talk about data portability. Okay.
Exactly.
So, portability and then accessibility. So if I'm understanding this right, a lot of small entrepreneurs have a couple different irons in the fire, where you can essentially have Rebilly handle all of your subscriptions for multiple services if you're
so you can use PayPal and Stripe and accept Bitcoin and accept other. We handle multiple currencies, all kinds of things. So we handle over a dozen different types of payment instruments themselves.
Wow.
Over 100 currencies. Not all of those have been transacted on our system, but I'd say at least 50 currencies have been transacted in our system.
Yeah.
We've done, tens of millions of transactions worth billions of dollars have flowed through our system, and we're storing the data of millions, tens of millions of consumers. And that's a burden.
Yeah.
Right? We have to be very secure and not only comply with regulations, but with our own sense of peace of mind.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say expectations, but yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I was thinking about this in, like I said, in terms of the podcast itself, but if you are a company that is either pre-revenue or you're already starting to see some traction from your business, like how would you engage with Rebilly? Yeah,
so how would you engage is, well, I suppose you probably have an idea. First, you need to have an idea for your business. We're not going to help you come up with an idea or something. I should hope not. That. Some people do contact us and they're like, hey,
what should I do?
I want a subscription business. What do I do?
Listen to Lee's podcast.
So now I've got something to tell them. Thank you, Lee.
I think that would be funny to talk to that person, because that might be a comedy hour.
It is. Some conversations are funny, but sometimes they have a product, or they're developing a product, and they want to monetize it. They come up with. Some people are confused about the distinction between a Rebilly, which is just a software, versus like a Vantiv or Stripe or PayPal or something like that, which is a real payment service provider, which is the money flows through those organizations, and the money does not flow through us. We don't touch the money. We only send the instructions. So we are a gateway ourselves. So we're sending the instructions to other gateways, and in some cases like directly to processors. But we don't. The money doesn't come through our accounts. We don't pay you like that.
Yeah,
and the terms of that are negotiated.
That's where all the integrations are here.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, if you didn't, if you touched all the money, you wouldn't need PayPal or Stripe involved, right?
Right.
So perfect. You had mentioned before we started this that you have kind of seen a new pivot within Rebilly, which you called
Redoc. So
Redoc.
When we started Rebilly, we created an API. We're kind of like an API first company. So an API is a way for other servers to talk to our software, because most of our initial clients were on the larger side. They have their own pricing pages and thank you pages and everything in between. So they just need our service to handle the vaulting and the routing of the payment, and our rules engine, which we have built, which is kind of based on my ad experience, to optimize the approval rates, which maximizes their customers' lifetime value. Okay. So we built an API first, and we needed documentation for it. We created it ourselves, and very quickly the documentation and the API drifted apart.
Right.
So it wasn't, as I'm sure this is a newbie error, but I think this is a more common error than you'd expect. And at the time, we had kind of evaluated. There are some solutions out there, like one. It was called Swagger, and Swagger is a way you describe your API using it's not necessarily human readable, using a specification. And
I have no idea what that means.
So now it's changed its name. It's now called Open API.
Okay.
And so you describe your API in this way, and then with that description, you can power different parts of your API. So you can use it to automatically generate documentation. You can use it to run tests against your API to make sure it's doing what you said it's going to do. You can use it for all kinds of things throughout the life cycle of your API. So Swagger had come out with a new version that had met the needs that we needed to describe the way that we had written our API.
Right.
Which was bad, the way we had written our API, but that's another story. We've come out with another version and put that old one to rest. But so we're very excited. We describe the API. Now let's fire up this documentation. Right. We fire it up, and it looks terrible. Oh. And you're like, what happened? It looked good over there. It looks terrible with ours. What's going on? Like, oh, well, it doesn't handle certain things. I'm like, how could it not handle that? This is like we're not doing something that unusual.
Right.
And sure enough, we investigate further, and it's like, well, either we come out with yet another version of our API that will conform to what this documentation tool is expecting, or we need to find another solution. So this was about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. I remember because my youngest was just born, and I was up all hours. So it was the middle of the night, and I'm
laughing because that's exactly what I have going on in my house right now.
Yeah, middle of the night, I feel you, and I'm searching for how can we solve this problem, and I find someone who's an expert in this particular area. So I contact him, and he's in Ukraine, and he's like, well, maybe we can arrange a meeting for some time. I'm like, hey, I'm up now. I'm gonna be up all night, so don't schedule it for my daytime. That's when I'm gonna take my nap. So so we had a talk, and this guy was brilliant. He had very, very smart guy, and the way he explained things to me, all of a sudden, all these things that you kind of knew a little bit about this and a little bit about that, all of a sudden it all clicks together. Yep. And it all makes sense. And I felt like, I was in the Matrix.
You were enlightened.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Well, now you're out of the Matrix.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I could see that. I could see everything. So I asked him, I say, hey, Ron, is this something you'd be interested in doing? He said, well, he'd be interested in it, but he's more interested in cataloging the world instead of like his own projects at that time and cataloging the world of APIs. But he said, well, you know what might be interesting is if we made this open source and then others could benefit from it. I thought about it, and he's like, and this isn't competitive with what you're doing in terms of invoices and payments and subscriptions. So I said, okay, let's do that. So he recommended that he's an engineer himself, but he wasn't really a web developer. So he had said recommended that we hire someone else to do the heavy lifting.
Right.
And we hired Roman, and Roman built the first version of Redoc. We call it Redoc, sort of read from Rebilly, and doc for documentation. Short for reinventing documentation.
Well, hey, you guys got a pretty good name there, because you should see some of the names guys are picking up for their new companies these days.
So we built this thing, and it's a free open source project. Never put any real effort into promoting it. Yvonne and Roman, a little bit, not much. And we start using it, and it's working, and it's nice. We get to bypass our divergent documentation from the reality, and so it cuts out some work. So we get to focus on doing more work of the work that's more important, that we find more important.
Is this at redoc.ly?
Yeah, redoc.ly.
Adam, can you pull that up?
So this last year, we decided to turn it into a commercial company.
Okay.
So Roman is working on it full time, and it's really kind of intriguing because there are all kinds of large enterprises. I mean, like the Fortune 500 that are using it. So we found out that Rebilly, being in the payments and billing space, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they all use it.
They use your open source tool.
They use the open source tool.
Wow.
So we figure there must be a commercial business model there, either support, customization, or SaaS product. So as we've sort of gotten further into it, we rewrote it from the ground up. And Roman did, Roman and his team. And then we've come out with this Redoc Pro. It's in beta right now. There's nothing commercial really about this, but we get several
a place to check it out.
Several people. We do no advertising yet, but we still get several leads a day to this website. Right,
it's a big problem.
It is.
So when you say you're going to commercialize this, because I'm this is where my world is hitting yours in a pretty tangible way, is that when a piece of open source code goes out, generally there's a pay-for-play model after it gets to either production or if it gets to a certain size. And so are there a lot of customers that would be beyond that certain size where it's time to start saying, hey, you got to pay a bill here?
Well, kind of. So what we've done is we took this open source core and we made a pro version around it, which has advanced features that more enterprises would be interested in too.
Gotcha.
So you've heard of the microservices trend.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of like.
Can you describe microservices?
Yeah. So microservices is
a lot of people don't know what that
like
is.
If you look at Rebilly's API, well, we've split it into three, but Rebilly's got a big API, and a lot of enterprises, they'll have a big API, but actually what they have is a bunch of small APIs, and then they're just kind of glued together.
Okay.
So, but the idea behind a microservice is to write any of these small APIs is not a whole lot of work, and you can have a small team do it, and they can wrap their head around it completely, and they understand it, so it's easier for them to do and do right, and if they had to do it again, they could, and so there's a lot of sort of benefits for large enterprises to doing that. We're not we're on the fence at Rebilly. But so large enterprises might, and each of those, they might maintain their own API description, their own open API, their own documentation.
Right.
But at the same time, they still may want to have those docs all glued together with the others in a seamless way. So that's one thing that we do. The other thing is like a try it out. So you can try the API out from the browser, which is the final feature that our like the original Swagger UI has that our Redoc didn't have. So we have that.
Does Swagger paper?
No, it's a free tool. It's a free tool, but it's part of a bigger organization that has a lot of paid, paid add-ons and things like that. So ours is really, the model is going to be selling this sort of this pro version of it. And we have a concept which we haven't developed yet to the point where it's workable, is that this is for reference documentation specifically. So it's taking your specification and transforming it into human readable, nice, and we handle all sort of aspects of the spec that the other documentation providers don't handle.
Okay.
So that's why the big
all aspects of the spec.
Yeah. So like for example, if you have like a nested API, so where you might have like a request that has like a little part within another part, and so you're forming this request and it's complicated, a little bit complicated, like other documentation tools tend to break down there. The other thing is when there's something that Swagger calls or OpenAPI calls a discriminator. Okay. So think about it in terms of payments. Like you could have a payment card, and on a payment card, you'll have like what's called the PAN, which is the account number, like 4111. That is the account number, and an expiration date, and your name, yes, and your code, stuff like that. Yeah. So you have those kinds of attributes. But let's say you're paying by bank account, like e-check, ACH, that type of thing.
Okay.
You don't have that. You have a routing number and an account number. So, and the account number doesn't conform to the same type of account number as a credit card account number. It's the credit card account number is typically 16 digit. The ones that we're familiar with in the US are 16 digits. It can be like 12 to 19, but whereas in the US, a routing number is probably like 9 digits, and the account number is for a bank account, and the account number is variable length. Depends on the bank. Big banks, you're going to have a longer account number. Small bank, you're going to have a shorter account number. Maybe zero padded, but that's the. What's
zero padded?
Oh, I mean, just like with zeros on the left of the number.
Oh yeah. Okay, gotcha.
So that's an example of a discriminator, like where you might have an API where, hey, I'm going to take a payment from someone. We don't know if they're going to pay with a payment card or a bank account. But so how do we describe that? Well, the old ways were that you just list all of those fields, and in your description somewhere you say, hey, if it's a payment card, leave the bank account ones blank. If it's a bank account, leave the payment ones blank. But this gives you a way to kind of handle that in a way that's nicer, much better to handle, and gives you a good UX.
So Visa and American Express are using an open source platform that essentially you and a couple of friends created.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. That's like a tech kind of like I don't know, what would you call it? Like an underground kind of thing that it's very cool to see those things bubble up at those types of levels, especially when it's made for. Well, let me say it this way: when you make something for an industry and then it bubbles up to its Fortune 500, Fortune 10 counterparties, that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you throw a little party for yourself when you saw that was going on? Because I would have.
No, we didn't. But I think we're overdue. We're overdue. But we'll throw a party once we get this. A few last things worked out so that we can monetize it. Very cool. How will we monetize it? Well, we'll use Rebilly, and we'll set up a checkout page where someone can purchase it. We're in the process of writing our software license though, our non-open sourced license for the pro version.
Yeah.
And so when that's done, we'll have a checkout page where someone can subscribe to the product. We're going to have it available as like Visa and MasterCard. They use it on premise behind their firewall. It's for like internal documentation.
Okay.
Whereas, we have some clients that use it for their public documentation, like for their developer portals. So we will have a hosted version, which is possible for that style. But there's others. A lot of enterprises, they don't want their API descriptions to go beyond the edge of their internal firewall, so they need the on-premise version.
Gotcha. And then there's no space more rife with regulation than the financial one, so I'm sure there's plenty of circumstances. So last question for you before we let you go is, if you were giving advice to, given the stages of your career, let's say 22-year-old Adam Altman, what would it be?
I would say that don't underestimate the value of your network and people, because the further I've invested so much in trying to become better myself. Like when I look back at my young self, I was doing everything I could to make myself better. And I wasn't necessarily that effective because I wasn't seeing that one of the things that I could really have done was build up a better network, a stronger network, so that, because there comes times when you have an idea and you could capitalize on it. You may even have the money to pay for
if you only
the person.
knew the
if
person.
If I knew the person, if I knew the person. So
maybe you should start a podcast and interview local founders.
Well, anyway, I know someone who does that. So
yeah, well, I got some. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I always talk about like the power of tribe, and that's a term that's getting hijacked right now in politics. But if it's a better word for network, right? So it's like your tribe is the people that are around you. I always say birds flock, fish school, and people tribe. And that is to say, like, you got to figure out who you can get around you so that when push comes to shove and there's some enemy at the gates, whether that's a new idea or saying yes or no to something, you better have counsel. You better have someone that has dealt with this before. That's great. Great advice for 22-year-old self.
Thanks, Lee.
Perfect. Well, hey, Adam, I appreciate you coming on. And we'll see you